Hello, this is Mac Boland of IllinoisMapmen.com. Only today, I'm not here to talk about wrestling. I'm here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, firearms. Yeah. During my over 22 years in the military, most of it in special operations, I had the opportunity to be around firearms, handled numerous weapon systems, became very familiar with many types, everything from handguns, shotguns, rifles, machine guns. When it comes to firearms, and specifically when it comes to Second Amendment, gun control, the single biggest problem with people who are anti-gun and anti-Second Amendment is bingo. Now, there's tons of information out there on the internet about firearms, shooting, marksmanship. I'm going to try and keep this really brief and just cover a few things. Types of weapons, handguns, revolvers, semi-auto, rifles, which can be anything from bolt action to semi-automatic rifles. Most semi-automatic rifles, have a magazine, which is not a clip, and a little bit later I'm going to show the difference. Shotguns, several types, semi-auto, pump action, and then the classic type over-under side-by-side where you just break the breech open. And then machine guns. Machine guns, most only fire fully automatic and are exclusively a military weapon. They fire from what is called the open bolt, meaning you cock it back, and then when you pull the trigger, bolt goes forward, feeds around, and fires at a very high rate of fire. And then submachine guns, which are either fully automatic, the later designs were capable of selective fire. The reason it's called a submachine gun means subcaliber meaning a handgun round like a 9mm or 45. Speaking of rounds, basically this is a round. This is not a bullet. The bullet is just the top. You have a casing, a primer on the bottom for center fire, and powder on the inside. Now, real quick, I'm going to talk about one of the biggest bugaboos, boogeymen, whatever you want to call it, that the anti-gun people have, and that is assault rifles. And that's what it's called. It's not an assault weapon, it's an assault rifle, and the actual civilian version isn't even a true assault rifle. It's a semi-automatic rifle. Now, prior to World War II, there was no such thing as an assault rifle. Closest thing you had was the bolt action rifles, which were used in World War I, and then continued on into World War II, and then a semi-automatic rifle, the M1 Garand. But then, towards the end of World War II, Germans came out with a rifle, the STG-44, or Sturmgewehr, which literally means assault rifle. An assault rifle has a selector switch, which you can put on safe, fire, and automatic. It's a fully automatic weapon. Now, the civilian versions of these are semi-automatic. They do not fire at a high rate of fire of 600 to 700 rounds a minute. They fire as fast as you can pull the trigger. They look like the military version, but they are not the same. They even use the same magazines. Again, they do not fire on fully automatic. Now, they get a bad name because of the way they look, and then their association with mass shootings. Some people call them high-powered rifles. That's not true. Your typical AR-15, which fires a .223, 55.6mm, is a varmint round, basically for hunting purposes. So they're not weapons of mass destruction, and they're only as dangerous as the person whose hands they're in. I'm going to talk about the Second Amendment here in a minute. Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which is also part of the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, guarantees the right to bear arms. Now, I have heard all the attempts to interpret what a militia means. A militia is not a National Guard, it's not police, it's private citizens who own firearms. after you get past the commas, it clearly states the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. What is alarming is that you have to have organizations like the NRA defending a constitutional right. Now, I've heard all the arguments, and clearly, if you go back and you read quotes, comments, letters, books written by the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, John Adams, John Quincy Adams, Mason, Webster, Ben Franklin, they all point to this meaning the right to bear arms for the private citizen. Now, some people will say, oh, well, the Constitution's out of date. BS. Now, when they say not infringed, you look at gun control, and you hear the phrase sensible gun control. Sensible according to whom? I don't consider California's gun control laws sensible. I consider them ludicrous. In fact, the gun control laws in states like California, Connecticut, Massachusetts infringe on this amendment. Excessively so. Now, every time I see documentaries or videos, such as you find on Vox, or like that idiot Cenk Uygur off of Young Turks, you know, they always try and inject BS into it. They like to juggle statistics, but they always miss a few simple facts. First of all, the overwhelming majority of gun violence is committed by criminals, and I'm talking about almost 90%, by criminals with illegally obtained firearms. Secondly, every time they cite gun deaths, they tend to lump all of them together. The overwhelming majority of gun deaths are suicides, about 2/3. And when you get down past accidents, which some cases are the cause of negligence, when you get down to gun homicides, it's a very, very small number of the overall gun deaths. On the other hand, same thing. Gun homicides, overwhelmingly committed by criminals with illegally obtained firearms. Now, you'll hear people say, well, we need to get guns off the streets. First, you need to get criminals off the streets. So, before you talk about gun control, which primarily has no effect at all on criminals committing crimes, just on people who are responsible firearm owners, deal with the problems that cause crime first. It's a lot harder to deal with poverty, broken education, etc., particularly in the urban trash heaps we have in this country, versus actually solving the problem. It's easier for them to point the finger at guns and heap the blame in that direction. Now, I'm going to cover some misconceptions, myths if you want to call them, because a lot of times, again, the anti-gun people, the people who push gun control laws, either don't understand or have a misconception of a lot of things. And they resort to pushing legislations or referendums like they did here in Cook County, where they had a referendum and they used universal background checks as a Trojan horse and lumped 3 issues into one question, yes or no, involving high-capacity magazines and semi-automatic rifles. So you didn't have a choice to go between the 3. Now, knowing that there was no way the universal background checks was going to happen, instead they specifically were targeting the magazines and the semi-automatic rifles. And again, like I said, they used the universal background checks as a Trojan horse. And it's pretty much the same thing that the idiot Mark Kelly and his wife Gabby Giffords are pushing with the Firearm Dealer Act. It's just a way to heap layers of restrictions and fees to drive gun owners out of business. Has no effect at all on, say, a Cabela's or the big box stores, just specifically the smaller gun dealers. And that's, in effect, you remove the gun dealers, you remove the arms. So let me cover a couple of things here real quick. Okay, online gun purchases. Private citizen, unless he has a federal firearm license, cannot purchase a firearm online and have it delivered directly to his home. You can purchase guns online, absolutely. If you have the proper ID, you still have to fill out the paperwork, and that firearm gets delivered to a federally firearm licensed dealer. You go there to pick it up. You pay the $50 transfer fee, and if you live in Cook County, you pay the $25 firearm tax on top of the sales tax. Same with ammo. Now, gun show loophole. This is one of my favorites. Okay, first of all, there's no such thing as a gun show loophole. See, a loophole implies that you're doing something legal, but that's wrong. Okay, if you go to a gun show and you live in the state of Illinois, you cannot legally purchase a firearm. I don't care where that gun show is located. If you don't have a FOID, you still have to fill out the forms legally. Now, do people purchase guns illegally? Sure, but it's not a loophole. And gun shows do a lot of business, but to legally purchase a firearm at a gun show, you have to have the proper documentation, period. And a lot of guys go in to do these little exposés, and most of them get turned away. I've seen quite a few where they try and go and say, oh, well, can I just get this or can I get that? Nope. They tried one at Maxon's, which is a firearm dealer. Guy from the Sun-Times thought he was going to be doing an exposé, and they denied him the sale because he had a felony conviction for spousal abuse. Okay, then, universal background checks. Now, this is something that they've been pushing, and there are already background checks required in several states. The problem is with universal background checks, like the no-fly list, it's such a large volume of people. Who's going to manage it, and how accurate is it going to be? The FBI has already stated that at this point in time, it's impossible to basically introduce universal background checks. Now, lastly, fully automatic weapons. Yes, a private citizen can purchase and own a fully automatic weapon. However, you have to be in an area where it's legal. In the state of Illinois, for instance, it's not. You have to meet all the requirements under the ATF, which are extremely stringent. You have to demonstrate a need, like let's say you're running a range or something, you have people come in and want to pay money to fire a fully automatic weapon. The security and storage requirements are again, very stringent, as they should be. But yes, a private citizen can purchase and own a fully automatic weapon under those circumstances. So I'm going to go back to the semi-automatic rifle, or as they call now, assault-style rifle. People say, well, who needs them? I shoot competition. I use one all the time. Go to the range, use it all the time. And I want to maintain my proficiency. Secondly, for home self-defense, something like an AR-15 platform is perfect. Why? 16-inch barrel, easy to shoot, again, a magazine that can hold multiple rounds, and it's accurate. Now, I've seen people with a handgun, which takes a lot of training to master and to shoot accurately, but I've seen people with a handgun miss targets 3 to 5 yards away, just yanking the trigger, because you're dealing, in a lot of cases with anywhere from a 6-inch to maybe a 4-inch barrel. So yes, something like a semi-automatic rifle is perfect for home defense. Let's even go one step further. So, who needs rifles, shotguns, high-capacity magazines? Well, I'll tell you what, in 1999, during the Watts riot in LA, Korean neighborhoods were specifically targeted because the community felt that they were taking advantage and making money off of them. So what happened was all those Korean people stood on rooftops, stood out in front of their shops, and defended their neighborhood with rifles, shotguns, etc. And the rioters went and looted and burned everything else around them. Go to Ferguson, Missouri. Michael Brown shooting, riots ensued. The only places that were spared were people who stood out in front of their shops and protected their property. And then it happened again when the verdict came down that decided not to indict Officer Wilson. They rioted again. Same scenario. Baltimore, Maryland, where you had an idiot mayor basically tell the police to stand down and give the rioters their space and let them vent, and they looted and burned and tore the neighborhood down. So if you're a business owner, how are you and maybe your employees going to protect yourself from what I consider a worst case scenario? Now with a handgun. And then lastly, terrorist attack. Paris, France, 130 people killed. Nobody had any weapons. No private citizens in that area could defend themselves because of the gun laws in Paris. Now, again, these are worst case scenarios. But when you think it'll never happen, that's usually when it does. Okay, I want to talk again about two very important Supreme Court decisions that happened a while back. You had District of Columbia versus Heller, which the lower court found in favor of Heller and his right to own a handgun. Now, that was overturned by an appellate court who, coincidentally, Merrick Garland, who was President Obama's nominee to fill Justice Scalia's vacant seat, the late Justice Scalia, specifically because of his stance on gun control and because he voted to overturn the lower court decision. And then, of course, with a 5-4 vote, the Supreme Court upheld the lower court decision and found in favor of Heller that handgun bans were unconstitutional, and of course the left freaked out from there. Village of Oak Park, City of Chicago. So then Chicago tried to restrict it. You had another lawsuit, McDonald versus City of Chicago. McDonald won that one. Chicago couldn't do anything about the handgun ban or the concealed carry laws. Now, again, I go back to the gun control idiots who right away predicted gloom and doom and that private citizens would be having gun battles on the L and people would be running around shooting the place up. It never happened because most of the time they're wrong. Now, there's a lot of gun violence in Cook County and the city of Chicago, but again, it's by criminals with legally obtained weapons. So why do we have all this gun control that has no effect on crime rates like in California, Compton, Oakland? Because criminals don't obey the law. And the only thing these laws affect are responsible gun owners. Now, speaking of responsible gun owners, I'm a member of the NRA. I'm also a member of the Illinois State Rifle Association. Both organizations support training, support proper gun safety, and when I say that, if you're going to own a firearm, when I say responsible firearm owner, if you're going to own a firearm or have a concealed carry license, it is your responsibility, one, to learn how to properly, safely use that firearm, store it in a safe place, and if you have children in the house, never ever leave a loaded weapon where a child can get their hands on it. Because the worst thing that could happen is a death of an innocent child, a firearm that you negligently stored. And then lastly, again, if you're going to own a concealed carry license, it is your responsibility to train properly so you can use it properly, you can hit what you're aiming at, God forbid if you should ever actually have to draw. That's your responsibility. And there are tons of ranges around here. If you're going to own a firearm, there is no excuse for you not to go out there and learn how to safely use it, how to accurately fire it, and how to safely store it. After this, I'm going to go give a few examples of some firearms that I own and take it from there. Okay, we're back here. I got a few examples of some rounds here, going from left to right. Going to start over here on the end, and that is a .22 caliber long rifle. Very popular round, and really the best round if you want to start somebody off shooting, you know, like a child. And we're going to move over here. That is a 9mm. And if you notice the notch on the bottom, that's for use in semi-automatic pistols. And then next to it is a 45 ACP. Also, again, noting the notch near the bottom of the cartridge. Next to that is a 357 Magnum. Now, if you notice the difference in the bullet on the top of the cartridge, that's because this is a semi-jacketed hollow point. Hollow point used primarily for defensive purposes. Then, moving over to the right, that is a 5.56 millimeter or .223 caliber. That's the type of round used in an AR-15. Then next to that is a 308 or 7.62 millimeter. Interesting to note now, this is a NATO 7.62 millimeter, which is a by 51 millimeter, which is not compatible with the 7.62 used in an AK-47, which is a 7.62 by 39 millimeter. Shorter round, they are not compatible. And then lastly, for the rifle rounds, moving on to this next one on the right, that is a 300 Winchester Magnum, used both for hunting and for sniper. 300 Win Mag, powerful enough to drop any game animal in North America. Very flat trajectory, very powerful round. And then lastly on the right here we have a 12 gauge shotgun round, double-aught buckshot. If you look through the top there you can kind of see the pellets. And again, that is for use in either a pump or semi-automatic shotgun. Okay, let's start off. This is a revolver. This particular model is a Smith & Wesson Model 19. Shoots a 357 Magnum. As you can see, it has a cylinder, holds 6 rounds. This is the only gun that I keep loaded in the house where I can get to it fairly easily. Leave one chamber empty where the hammer rests with 5 rounds. The nice thing about revolvers is you can leave this loaded indefinitely, and unlike a magazine, which, you know, if you have a semi-auto, you leave the magazine loaded, it has a spring. Over time, that spring will wear out and eventually start causing malfunctions because as the spring compresses, it won't properly feed the round into the chamber. This is what's known as a speed loader, even though it's not really very fast. So again, Smith & Wesson Model 19 revolver, chambered for 357 Magnum, and 38 Special is actually compatible. The diameters are so close that you can actually fire 38 Special in a 357 Magnum. Now, this is a 22. This is a semi-automatic pistol, Ruger. It's a basically it's a target model. Holds a 10-round magazine. And the nice thing about this is this is a great pistol to teach someone on. Just to learn the fundamentals, the basics of a sight picture, fundamental marksmanship, squeezing the trigger, 22 caliber, so again, very, very low recoil, has a fixed front sight and an adjustable rear sight that will adjust for both windage, i.e. left and right, and elevation. If you've ever seen any target competition in precision shooting, it's a totally different stance than what you're used to seeing, say, in combat shooting or practical shooting. Precision shooters will adopt a stance, hand in the pocket, one hand. They'll close, in some cases even put like a patch over the non-firing eye, pretty much like that. And the type of targets usually used for precision shooting, this is a 25 yard, but it's a reduced bull to basically represent what a 50 yard bullseye would look like for slow fire. And then this is the 25 yard for timed and rapid fire. and in each case you're firing 2 5-round strings, so that's how they score it. And this is a Colt 1911. This is the Series 80 version. This semi-automatic handgun was designed by Browning, and gives you an idea, 1911. This gun has been around for a long, long time. Probably one of the most successful designs. A little bit complicated in assembly and disassembly. This particular one holds an 8-round magazine. This is what's known as a single stack magazine, and I'll get to what a double stack or staggered stack magazine is later when I get into the more high capacity round magazines. As a safety, it fires single action only, meaning when you pull the trigger, the hammer's already locked in place, safety on. Take safety off, you pull the trigger, it fires, and then it'll cycle, chamber another round. Again, this fires what's known as a 45 ACP, automatic Colt pistol. The 45 long cartridge, which is a revolver cartridge, is not compatible with this gun. Again, this is an excellent gun for self-defense and competition. I use it for competition and 3-gun competition. Has low sights, iron sights, and now I showed you the precision stance before. This is basically a self-defense stance. Now I shoot with both eyes open, and if you're going to get into any kind of practical shooting or self-defense, you should teach yourself to shoot with both eyes open. Now I'm right-handed, I'm left eye dominant, so I have to kind of cock my head slightly to get the sights lined up properly. You can't see it here, but there's 2 dots, 2 white dots on the rear sight, and a bright orange painted front sight. Again, this is more of a practical stance. Okay, and this is a 9mm. This is the Sig Sauer P226. I actually have an extended magazine on this one. This is a 20-rounder. The normal magazines that come with it are 15-round magazines. Now this is staggered in that it loads double wide and narrows down to where 1 round is at the top. But again, this magazine right here will hold 20 rounds. Normal magazine that comes with this holds 15. Now this one's actually fitted with what's known as night sights. In low light conditions or absolute darkness, they glow green. A lot of good sights like this on the market. Interesting thing about this now, I just cocked it, there's no safety. It has a decock, so you can carry it and shoot in double action mode. Now the difference between double action and single action. Double action, as you can see, that's a longer trigger pull. That's about twice the amount of pounds of pressure to pull back versus when it's cocked, now it's in single action mode. That's the difference. So again, there's no safety on this like in the 45. 45, that Colt 45 fires single action only. This fires double action or single action. And again, like I said, it has a decock. So now there's a round in the chamber, but it's safe to carry. So again, this is Sig Sauer P226 9mm. This is also a 9mm semi-automatic. This is the Ruger American Standard. This, like the Glock, is what's known as a striker-fired handgun. If you notice, there's no hammer. This one holds a 17-round magazine, and I have on here a Crimson Trace Railmaster, which is basically a laser sight. Now, very easy to take down, very simple. I didn't mention before, like the Colt 1911 series, a little bit more complicated. Durability became an issue, so the Army started to switch, at least the Rangers and Special Ops units started to switch from the Colt later to the Beretta, which is a 9mm, and now to the Glock, which, you know, like this, striker fired, very simple. Once you cock this, there is no safety, there's no hammer. The safety is actually in the trigger, and this is how it's carried. And it's drop safe. I could drop this, it wouldn't go off. And safety being in the trigger, boom. Very simple design, very easy to take apart. Excellent choice. Glock's very popular. I've never been a big Glock fan, but I did like this particular one. This is, again, this is the Ruger American Standard. Also, 1911, heavier gun, all steel construction. On this, much like the Glock and like the SIG, the top, the slide, is steel. It's metal. The bottom is polymer, so it's a little bit lighter. Some people, you know, the balance is kind of funny. I actually like this one quite a bit for a striker fire handgun I ever owned. And right out of the box, it shot great at the range. Okay, and this is a version of an AR-15. This particular one is a Colt. Fires 5.56 millimeter or .223 caliber. Same thing. This particular version is a CRX 16E. Again, uses for 3-gun competition. Has a sling, has a handguard on it, has flip-down iron sights, and this one has an optic. This is the Vortex Strike Fire. Very popular, what they call red dot, different types of sights, prism, reflex. Very accurate, and you know, same thing, you can shoot both eyes open. Difference being, you're not worried about aligning rear sights and a front sight to the target. You just have the dot to put on the target. Another thing, this particular one uses the rail system, and I've got another rifle I'll show later that also has it mounted. The Picatinny 1993 Weaver rail system. When they came out with it, was, you know, phenomenal design. It allowed to mount things easily and unmount. You could put night sights on it. You could put IR sight. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And this is a polymer magazine. Has a selector. Again, this is semi-automatic. This is not like an assault rifle, which is capable of firing both semi and fully automatic. Now, this is these are steel magazines, more durable. Polymer magazines are popular, but again, they're not steel. This is a tandem mount, so you can actually have 2 magazines, change, and as I mentioned earlier, here's the difference. Okay, this is a magazine, this is a clip. Now, some rifles, particularly some of the old bolt actions, and like I mentioned before, the M1 Garand, you could take a clip and they would go directly in the chamber. This, when you use a speed loader, is used to load directly into the magazine. Okay, so there's your difference. This is a magazine, this is a clip. Standard 20 to 30 round magazines is used, of course, in some of the moronic states. You know, they have a thing called a bullet button around the magazine release, so you can't release a magazine. It's not detachable unless you poke at it with like a screwdriver or something, and then they have limits on 10 rounds, which is idiocy. But again, no, this is a version. Now, this one isn't an outlawed version because, ironically, when I talk about the AR-15 and they talk about assault-style rifles, it's not that it's semi-automatic that they go after it. They go after it for having things like a bayonet stud, which this doesn't have, a folding stock. This has got a solid stock. It does have a pistol grip, and it does have a magazine release. And it also has a tactical sling. So, again, this is a 5.56 And 5.56 is not a high-powered rifle, low recoil. In fact, the round, the .223 caliber 5.56 millimeter round, is actually classified as a varmint round. Okay, and this is the Sig Sauer 716. This fires the NATO 7.62 millimeter 308 Winchester. This has flip up and down, fixed sights. Also utilizes the rail system, which I was talking about, and this uses a, you can get a 10, 20, or 30 round magazine for this as well. This is a polymer magazine. Now, I mentioned before about the Weaver rail mounting system, and one of the reasons why it's so popular there. I just mounted a bipod and a scope. This is a Vortex, and it's a 2x8 power variable. This is a very basic 308 design. The precision rifles in 308 have scopes. Again, this is just a 2x8. They go anywhere from that to maybe 4x16, and again, variable power, so you can turn the scope to adjust the distance, and then if you do purchase a scope, they also have a field of view 35 millimeter, 50 millimeter, which gives you the dimensions. Again, now this is 308. This does have a folding stock, fairly accurate rifle. Your more accurate rifles are bolt action. And I'll show you an example of a hunting rifle here in a second. So again, Sig Sauer 716, not 5.56 like the AR. This is chambered for 7.62 millimeter. Okay, this is a bolt action rifle. This is a Ruger Model 77. This is chambered for 300 Winchester Magnum. This is a hunting rifle, has a Leupold scope. This is 2x7 power. You notice I also have a bipod mounted on this. I'm a firm believer in bipods, hunting, practical shooting, because it always provides you with a more stable platform, which will allow you to take a more accurate shot. And it's lightweight, flips up out of the way. Now again, this is a bolt action rifle. You manually operate the bolt. The rounds go down into a magazine in the chamber. It has a safety mounted on top here. Safe, fire. And again, this is a hunting rifle. And as I mentioned before, a 300 Winchester Magnum, very versatile round, again, powerful enough to drop any game animal in North America. Also notice the recoil pad on here. When you get up into these type of rifles, you're talking about serious recoil. And some people, if they've never fired before, this is definitely not a rifle that I would have somebody fire as a first timer. And people, if you break them in too soon on higher caliber rifles, 7mm Magnum, or like this 300 Winchester Magnum, they get gun shy. You may turn them off to the sport if you want to introduce them to the sport. So it's good to start gradually, with 22 or 223, and then work up. Even a 308 has somewhat of a recoil. This has a very significant recoil. Okay, lastly, I'm going to talk shotguns. I have here two 12-gauge shotguns. Both are tactical shotguns. One's a pump, the other's a semi-automatic. Both are Mossbergs. First, this is a pump shotgun. It has folding stock. Now, also a recoil pad. Again, 12-gauge shotgun does have significant recoil. This is, you know, you'll see in the movies the sound all the time. Okay, top mounted safety. This particular magazine tube holds 6 rounds. 5 in the chamber, and then 1 in the 5 in the tube, 1 in the chamber. And again, great. This is a great home defense weapon if you can handle recoil. You know, again, if it's somebody who's never fired a rifle before or fired a shotgun, not something I would break them in on. And this has iron sights. And then you fire, chamber the next round, ready to fire again. Okay, this is a semi-automatic, also 12 gauge. Now you notice the difference. This doesn't have a folding stock. It's got a fixed stock because of a spring. Because of the spring, like a semi-automatic rifle, when the bolt comes back and chambers the next round, the spring absorbs a lot of the recoil. Now this has a recoil pad. Both these 12 gauge, similar, but this one has noticeably less recoil because of the recoil spring. Also on this particular shotgun, this holds 8 rounds. 7 in the tube, 1 in the chamber. Again, top mounted safety. And then when you fire this one, it acts just like a semi-automatic rifle. So, 2 different versions of 12 gauge shotgun, both use the same round. But again, 1 pump, 1 semi-automatic. So that's going to wrap this up. I would note the semi-automatic 12 gauge Mossberg I showed you there. That's the shotgun I use in 3-gun competition. 3-gun competition, handgun, semi-automatic rifle, shotgun. If you're ever interested in purchasing a handgun for self-defense, whatever, if you just want to learn how to shoot, I'm more than happy at any time to teach anybody. Hope to see you out there on the range one day. This is Mac Boland, IllinoisMatmen.com, and again, not talking wrestling, talking firearms. Hope to see you out on the range someday.